Today, we will be taking a look at Apple's infamous 12-inch Retina MacBook. Considering its controversial history, was it really that bad? Well, let's find out. This specific model is from its last model year, 2017, in the rose gold color and is in fact the upgraded mid-range version with a 1.3 GHz dual-core i5 which is passively cooled, 8 GB of LPDDR3 memory, and a 512 GB SSD. Not bad when this thing came out 7 years ago, and still passes by okay in today's standards. So yes, as I said, this was the last model year. The 12-inch Retina MacBook was released back in 2015 as an ultra-portable MacBook, and was basically the first MacBook that took on the new design generation, parting away from the iconic MacBooks with the glowing Apple logo. And from a standpoint, this laptop is pretty impressive. It took a lot of genius engineering to design a portable like this so compact. Props to Apple for making it a reality, and it really is cool and impressed a lot of people when it came out. Unfortunately, this computer introduced a few design elements that would plague the upcoming future generation of MacBooks, including itself. In order for Apple to get the Mac super thin, they had to partially compromise the keyboard, cutting the thickness of the keys and their travel down by half, thus the introduction of the butterfly keyboard. It's safe to say people hated this keyboard, not only because the keystrokes were so shallow, but because these types of keyboards were prone to failure. Depending on the user and the amount of use, these keyboards had a tendency to double type in a single keystroke and even get sticky, rendering the keyboard experience not pleasant or unusable. This happened to a lot of early MacBooks and MacBook Pros. The butterfly keyboard eventually got more reliable in later revisions, but still not great. Thankfully, mine still works pretty well, being able to type up the script of this video just fine. Another thing people took issue with was the lack of ports. Only a single USB-C port and a headphone jack are seen on this machine. That's really all this computer had to offer to begin with due to its power restraints. Speaking of power restraints, that leads me on to my last point: power. These laptops were slow, even when they were being manufactured and shipped to consumers. Since these CPUs were passively cooled, it even caused thermal throttling on top of its low power to begin with, making these painful to use at times. It's almost like the 12-inch Retina MacBook was ahead of its time, maybe just a few years too early. It didn't help that Apple priced this thing well over $1,000 rather than at an entry price, which would have been compelling. But alas, it didn't do that well in sales. And so, as a result of its harsh controversy, they only made these things from 2015 to 2017, which really goes to show how terrible these things were. Now, I think it's time we take a closer look at this thing. I've already mentioned the specs of this MacBook, but I'll go ahead and list them back on the screen as a reminder before we look at how this thing performs. Let's take a look and see how it compares against similar MacBooks. And if I'm gonna be honest, I'm kinda impressed. I genuinely thought this computer was going to perform much worse than the 2015 and 2016 13-inch MacBook Pros. I do believe the upgraded Core i5 over the Core M3 makes a massive difference alone. And now with casual computing, it's not fast by any means, and it does take a while for some of the pre-installed applications to get going, but once they do, it's passable. In fact, I have installed Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop onto this laptop, and editing photos in Lightroom was actually pretty solid. Gaming is definitely not something in mind when buying a laptop like this, and it shows. Minecraft does not run great, but with some setting tweaks, you can get the game to run pretty smoothly, and that's about all it has to give. Even though it's passively cooled and doesn't even make a noise in the slightest, the chassis does get hot, and is that ever true after doing a bit of our testing? The computer has managed to get to a burning level on the palm rest, but at least it still works. Over the course of making this video, I've gotten to experience what it's really like to daily drive one of these things. And honestly, it hasn't really been too bad. Or at least better than what I was expecting for what that's worth. And I have a few things I'd like to share about this thing. First and foremost, being its small size, I can't even begin to explain how nice it has been to whip this thing in and out of a bag and simply carry it around at a time's notice. After all, that's what it was designed for and certainly excels at that. And the battery life on this particular Mac usually lasts for about half a day from a full charge. Other than that, the real problem I've had daily driving a computer like this is the performance. After a bit of time, I've started to notice its slowness, and while it didn't really bother me in the beginning, after a while, it really started to become a drag. Web browsing, which is quite slow, especially when you're impatient all the time. And sometimes it takes forever to open Chrome, especially after a restart. Also, due to the hardware, Chrome tabs lag, which in all honesty just sucks. It doesn't help that it may endure hours of use at a time, which causes the passively cooled CPU to overheat in most cases, make the chassis hot, and possibly thermal throttle, and make this experience even slower than it already is. So, in the end, it wasn't a powerful computer to begin with, or the best in the slightest. But it was fantastically light and thin, which at the time was definitely a feat of engineering. While I don't necessarily recommend this laptop to anyone who is going to do anything more than open a few emails, it would be pretty decent as a secondary laptop or just one to screw around with. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and thanks for sticking around until the end. If you have any suggestions on videos you would like to see me make, please leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one.